started and talk to you a little bit about imports in Intacct. So when you log into Intacct, you can go under your company menu and set up and import data, and you'll see a company setup checklist here, and that's going to show you all the imports and templates that we have throughout the system. So you'll be able to see, everything under AP that can be imported, as well as get copies of those templates. So this is the kind of one-stop shop to get all of your templates, and to be able to process and do all of your imports as well from this one screen. You do have to make sure that your users that are going to do the imports have permissions to this company setup checklist. So when you're setting up permissions, you just have to make sure that they, have access to that to be able to get those templates as well as do imports throughout the system. So I just chose one kind of at random here, a journal entry import template, and I opened that and downloaded that here so we can take a look at that. And just a couple of things I want to point out on these templates. First and foremost, this first row here at the top, that has the actual codes and the objects that each of those fields is going to sync to or import data into when you use these imports. So it's critical that you not change those, even if you may have relabeled location in your system and use different terminology, but it's critical that those remain as they are in the initial template when you download them, because that's what tells the system where to connect that data and where to populate the data in those different transactions. Then on the second row here, you'll see some information. So this is just information that's helpful to tell you what it's expecting in that particular field. And it also marks whether that field is a required field. So for example, if you look at this description field here at the bottom of the notes, you'll see that it says it's a required field, yes. So this is just going to let you know which fields you must have data in when you're doing an import. So all of the imports, depending on, regardless of whether you're importing master data, transactions, they're all going to look very similar with those row headers at the top, and then that description there that kind of gives you information as to what it's expecting. These templates are super flexible. So if you're not using something and it's not required, you can delete the column out. So for example, if I'm not using reverse date, I know these are journal entries I'm going to enter in don't need to be reversed. It's not a required field. I can just delete that and kind of clean this template up so that it's nice and tidy and very streamlined for what I'm using it for. Because this does start out here as an Excel spreadsheet, I can also link it to other files, other workbooks. So if you've got calculations where you're, creating journal entries from another report or something like that, you can link that and put formulas in here. So you can do all of that normal Excel functionality in your templates. One thing that we do tend to get a lot of questions on, and sometimes customers need help with, is this line numbering. So in your imports for transactions, every time the system sees a line number 1, that's how it knows when to start the next transaction. So if, for example, I wanted to have 2 journal entries in here, and import 2 separate journal entries, I can do that, and the system is going to read that and say, okay, I have number 1, number 2, so that's my first 2 lines in my first journal entry, and then when it sees that number 1 again, it's going to start over and create a new transaction. You can have multiple transactions in your import, so that's not just a 1 journal entry, 1 AP bill, et cetera. You can have multiples, but it does require that you have that line number 1 for it to be that identifier that it needs to start the next transaction. If for some reason I was not wanting to import this particular line, so I put that pound sign in column 1 there, or column A, so that it doesn't import that. it will give you an error in this case, because when it starts that second journal entry, it doesn't see a number 1. So it is critical when you have multiple transactions in and you are restarting that count over, that you have a row that has line number 1. So if you have formulas in where you're skipping rows, things like that don't need to be imported, you do need to just make sure that your line number for each new transaction does always start with line 1, and that is an importable row. It's not set to skip that. Okay. So once you have that entry completed, I typically recommend saving these in Excel so that if you have formulas in there, it's not going to lose those. So I always save a copy of my journal entries as an Excel file, and then you save it as a CSV to actually import it. So just do a file save as. Then if I have any errors as well, I can reopen my Excel file, work on those, get those corrected, and then just save it as a CSV file right before I get ready to import it, and then go on to my import. Okay. So when you get ready to import, again, you can do that from the company setup checklist. So I can scroll down here in this particular case and say I want to import in a general ledger journal entry, and I can click on the import button there. I've also opened up just another tab here, and I'm already in my journal entries, but you'll see an import transactions button as well on that task. So you can import throughout the system. You don't have to do it from that company setup checklist, but that's just a nice consolidated place to see everything. So when I get ready to import in the transactions, I'll choose the file that I want to import in. So I'll just pick my journal entry here. Typically, you leave all the rest of this blank, or as it defaulted, the month or the date format. If for some reason this is a file that's being created, that's coming from another system, and they do have a different format for the date in there, you can change that. But typically, if you've created just the Excel file and are saving it as a CSV, that's typically the standard date format. But if you do have something that's coming from another system, or you've changed that format, you may need to make sure that it matches here on your import screen the format that's in your file. And then the file encoding auto detect, you want to leave that as its default. That's just letting it auto detect and read those file headers, column headers, etc., so that it knows the objects to populate your data. The next field here, the process offline, you won't see that on every import screen. Some of the larger imports, sometimes it's not an option to process offline. So if you don't see that, it automatically is set to process offline. But in some imports, such as journal entries, you do have that option. And what that does when you select that is it places that import out on the Intacct servers and puts it in their queue to process using their server space and resources, so that I can continue on and keep working on something else and not sit and watch and wait for it to import. Now, most of the imports just run within seconds to minutes if they're a large import, so you're not waiting a long time for things to import. But one of the reasons, even on smaller imports, that I personally like to do the process offline is because when I get the email notification, if there were any errors in my import file, I will get that error log in the email as well, and not just have to remember to download that. So just as a kind of example here, I do have an error here, or a journal that I know is going to cause an error here. I'm going to choose to not process that offline and then import, and you'll see that it comes up and gives me an error message that I had a journal entry with an error. If I want to actually get the file with my errors in it, then I have to remember to click here to download that file. If I choose, and then I can open that and view that and save that. But if I choose to process offline, then when I get my email notification that you'll see here, it'll have that error file attached to that email. So that's one reason why, even if I'm choosing to import a very small file that just will literally take seconds to import in, I usually will do that offline as well. So then I've got that in my email. So then I can work on that and deal with that, fix any errors, etc. So I've got two examples of emails here as well. So if you have a successful import in here, you'll see you get an import success notification. It's going to tell you how many transactions were imported and let you know that information. If you get an error, you'll see that it tells you, which file you were importing. So here's my file that I had chosen to import in, and it's going to tell me how many errors there were. So in this case, I just had one journal in there in my import, and that errored out. If you have multiple journal entries in your transaction file, for example, and only one of them errored out, it will import in the rest of them. So it's not going to roll that back and just and have the entire file fail. It'll import in the journal entries that it can, and then just let you know in your error file which one failed. So that's another reason that I like to get this error notification with the error file attached in the email, is then I will know out of the 30 journal entries I had in my import template, which in particular journal entry failed, and be able to see that. Okay. And then you'll see on these error files or email notifications some additional information that typically tells you here what the errors are. Sometimes I will tell you these error codes are, error descriptions here are not necessarily super user-friendly. They sometimes sound a little cryptic. In this case, I have an invalid location. That one's pretty straightforward. I understand what that means, and then it tells me the correction. So the description of the error, and then what the correction would be is to pick a valid location. So then I can go fix that. Sometimes these error messages aren't quite as clear. So they are, these codes are typically out in the Intacct community. So if you have seen our previous session, our Feature Friday that we had on how to connect to the Intacct community to go look at knowledge-based articles and connect with other users, you can search on those error codes out there, and for the most part, I've seen those out there where it gives you a little bit more information and provides a little bit more detail on what that error typically is, and then how you can go about fixing that. You can also, of course, reach out to any of us on our Intacct team if you have any questions, and we can certainly help with those as well. Okay. So that's some kind of tips and tricks on the imports and those templates, how to use those. Again, they're very handy. You can import in just a ton of data in the system, master data, transactions, budgets, so you can see those throughout the system. And they're very easy to use, very straightforward, and they're very flexible. So you can, like I said, do formulas and attach to other spreadsheets with calculations, copy and paste things in, or link those to other files. So just really friendly from a user experience. You don't have to know a lot of coding or, worry about, I've got to get this in this exact format. You can really, those templates are very flexible from that aspect.